This is the story of Harold Skinner and the 1939 Spirit Lake fire. From its start in 1909, Spirit Lake was a model timber town. Here are the mill managers at their office, later moved to become Fireside Lodge, which is now Fireside Park. At times, the mill pond was filled with logs, originating in the log flume up Brickle Creek. Lumber was moved around the mill on train tracks with an electric train. The lumber was dried in stacks with boards between to allow even drying. Coincidentally, that's a good way to build a roaring campfire.
1939, the middle of August, when the fire broke out on the lower slopes of Mount Spokane, and that fire swept down, going north, eventually in the direction of the town of Blanchard, and it almost burned the town of Blanchard, and then turned around under a new wind, and the fire swept across the slopes of the ridge, coming back towards Spirit Lake, and then it died down at about just west of the town of Spirit Lake on the upper slope there. People coming from everywhere as firefighters with a shovel, and that's about all they had in those days. And they went up there and built a perimeter around the fire that, with the wind that had died down, the fire stopped right there, right on the slopes above the lumber yard and the sawmill. And after about 3 days, with an effective brigade of firefighters up there, creating a perimeter around that fire line, things seemed to be going our way. As a 15-year-old kid, I found out that I could get a job fighting the fire. At 50 cents an hour, that was good money in those days. And so I was told to report, and I had been given a shovel, and with about 6 or 8 other fellows, we went to wait for a pickup that came down the mountain. It had already been up there before and had probably carried some other firefighters, I don't know. But once it came back down the mountain, we got in, a group of us, and we were going to relieve the firefighters that had been on the line fighting the fire up there. And we went up on a kind of zigzag pattern on a trail. That's about all it was. And that driver had to be handling that truck quite well, because he managed it well, and we got up there at a clearing on the slope of the mountain. And in that clearing, we turned around, parked our pickup, and all of us fellows got out with our shovels and thought, well, now where do we go? And there was a fellow that came out who had been working and had just come out in the last couple of minutes, and he said, well, the fire is over this way. And he pointed to the north on the slope. And he said, the men over there, you're going to relieve them, and they should be coming out any time now. And so with our shovels, we started ambling over in that direction, but we hadn't gone very far when all at once a fellow came running out of the area over there, and we thought, well, that's strange. Why in the world is he in such a hurry? And he said, you're not going to go in that direction. He says, the fire just broke loose, and a little snag fell across. We tried to contain it, but the fire got away from us. And he said, we've got to get the hell out of here and turn around and get down that mountain fast, because it's coming. It got into the trees. And sure enough, some fellows came running out of there in that direction and down to where we were, and we all got back into that truck. That we instead of relieving them, we were going to be getting out of there with them. And so that's what happened. We went back down the mountain to the edge of the lumber yard. When we got down there, we found out that the fellows fighting the fire in that area had managed to put firefighters' hoses into the water with the pumps. And then the long line of fire hoses stretched quite some distance over to where we had come down the mountain. And fellas, he said, we're fighting against time. He said, I don't know how much time we have. He said, maybe 20 or 30 minutes, but he said, that fire is going to be coming right down on top of us. So he said, let's hose down the woods all along the edge of the forest here. And so that's what we did. There were 5 or 6 of us on one hose, and I don't know how many other hoses there were, but they were all running along the edge of the forest where it met the lumber yard. And of course, as I say, the pumps were working, so we stood up there. I had never held a fire hose in my life, and there were 4 or 5 men ahead of me, and I thought, how in the world, what do I do here with that thing? And how am I going to manage with those men ahead of me? And I thought, well, I'll just back them up any way I can. I held on, and not knowing what was going to happen. And we opened up that hose, and we started spraying all of the edge of the forest there, and soaking down the trees. We just saturated the edge of the forest line there with water as far back as we could shoot it. And that went on, I have no idea. Must have gone on for close to half an hour. And sure enough, eventually we could begin to hear a roar. And it got louder and louder, and suddenly we could see the flames just cresting in the treetops coming down toward us. And but by that time we had poured so much water on the trees in that area that the flames came down, and I was scared stiff. I mean, I was ready to turn around and run, but I thought, I can't do that. Those guys are depending on me to back them up too. So I gritted my teeth, and I was scared out of my wits, but I held on. The flames came down on us with a roar, and then they hit that water-soaked area, and at that point the flames just died. And at that time we thought, well, at least the fire's over, our job is done. Little did we know, because we could see some black ash floating over and coming in our direction. And at first nobody told us what to expect. But we had those piles of lumber, stacks of lumber, all across the lumber yard there. An excellent picture there for us to see. And at that time, I was looking down at the ground when I saw those ashes floating over, and I could see a little black spot forming. And again, I didn't know what was happening, and I watched it, and all at once a little flame perked up out of that black ash. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is what we've got to be doing. And nobody had told us what to expect or what to do, but we grabbed shovels and we were running around. There were some well-dressed, white-shirted officials from the lumber mill who were coming and saying, scatter out through the lumber yard here, and we're having those spot fires, a little place here and a little bit there. And he said, you're going to have to put them out as fast as you can. Well, we didn't have to be told that. And so that's what we did. we probably were doing that for 15 or 20 minutes. But all at once, a stack of lumber near us, we could see it start flaming up. And then another stack flaming up. And it just swept across the lumber yard, and in no time the whole lumber yard was burning. The millions and millions of board feet of beautiful lumber that had been through the planer, it was a tragedy. I have no idea what the value was at that time of that lumber. But at that point, we made up our mind that we had done all the work that we could possibly do. Our job was to save ourselves and to leave the area and hope that we could get home and trust that maybe our houses wouldn't burn before that fire left. But the wind had changed. The fire took the lumber yard, but it was not being blown in any one direction for some time. It was just a godsend that the fire didn't move. If we'd had a wind that carried itself eastward against the town, the houses would have gone up. I'm just sure of that. So that's the story I have to tell.